Hello interwebs! Last week we finally got our premiere of Star Trek Picard, and with Star Trek Picard came a brand new theme song to add to the pantheon of fantastic Star Trek themes. So I figured it was about time to re-rank all of the Star Trek theme songs. This is going to be my personal ranking of the theme songs. It's not going to be what I think is the best, the most artistic or creative. It's my personal ranking and what I feel personally are the best. And I say that because I know that some of the choices on this list are going to be, let's say, controversial, to say the least. People are going to disagree with me in some way, shape, or form, which is totally fine. I'm actually really curious to hear your own thoughts down in the comments of how you would rank the theme songs. But just know, my personal ranking not necessarily has to be what I think is the authoritative stance on which theme is best. Also, I should say with this list, I'm only ranking the songs themselves. I'm not ranking the visuals that go along with the theme songs. That will actually be an entirely different list that I'll make at some point, because I do think that some of the visuals of the theme songs are fantastic, even if the actual songs behind them don't rank as high on my list. And to be fair, I do like all of the Star Trek theme songs. I don't think there's a bad one in the bunch. I know, again, some people will disagree with me, but I think overall they're generally really good. Also, I should say, I'm ranking every single variation of the theme, so if the theme song changed slightly between seasons, or we got a different type of theme song for an episode or two, that's going to be showing up on this list. So with all that said, let's start the ranking. Alright, first up on this list is the Star Trek Enterprise theme song, Faith of a Heart, from seasons 3 and 4.
It's been a long road, getting from there to here.
I don't think this is going to surprise anyone that this one is at the bottom of the list. The Enterprise theme song was controversial, to say the least, when it first came out, and I won't spoil where that song is going to be later on in the list, but it's clear that this variation on the theme that they introduced in seasons 3 and 4, where they sped up the track and they added this tambourine version to the song, really made it horrible. It was already a really weird, controversial decision, and they made it even worse by just making this really horrible, kind of even more poppy, strange choice for the Star Trek Enterprise theme song. And it's very clear that the Enterprise theme song was people who were decidedly not cool trying to pick a song that they thought was cool and hip and down with the youngins these days to make Star Trek Enterprise like a cool youth show. Very UPN CWE before we had the CW style established by DC comic shows and Supernatural and Vampire Diaries. And again, not spoiling where the other version of the song is appearing, but seasons 3 and 4 version is just terrible. Just really terrible. Alright, next up is the Star Trek Enterprise Mirror Darkly theme. This was the theme used for the Mirror Universe episodes of Enterprise, and I thought it so perfectly captured the dark, brooding, bombastic mood of the Mirror Universe. I thought it was a really cool surprise and treat for those of us watching that episode. It's oh, they're doing a new theme song. This is really interesting, cool. It was actually just a really clever and beautiful surprise to do for those two episodes. And the only reason that this honestly ranks lower on my list of Star Trek themes is because it's less iconic. All the other Star Trek themes on the list, I have some sort of personal connection to, just through my loving of the series, or when I first heard them, or a connection I have personally with them. This one I don't really have too much of a personal connection, so that's really the only reason it's so low on the list, because otherwise it's a fun, bombastic, dark, brooding theme that perfectly captures the Mirror Universe episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. Next up is the Star Trek Discovery theme song by Jeff Russo. This is another song that I really love. I don't think after this point that there's not a Star Trek theme song that I don't love in some way, shape, or form. And this song, I think, really beautifully captures the idea of Discovery. It's this kind of starts with this dark, kind of forlorn, sad note, doo, that perfectly kind of captured this sort of more sonorous tone, especially of Star Trek Discovery's first season. and kind of slowly crescendos into something more driving, more upbeat, more optimistic and hopeful that eventually climaxes in the original series fanfare. And I think that, again, perfectly encapsulates what Star Trek Discovery was, especially in Season 1 and in Season 2. A show that was kind of starting off sort of dark, forlorn, kind of sad, slowly driving more and more to get us that idea of a utopia, the belief in the future that we know Star Trek to be. It was all about getting from the dark to the light, and I think the song really captures that. And again, the only reason that this one ranks so low in my list is more because it relies a lot on previously established themes. It ends with that sort of original series theme song, which isn't necessarily inherent to this song. So that just lowers it, in my opinion. That may be an unfair knock because I think it's used intelligently and beautifully by Jeff Rousseau. But for me, just if we're making an arbitrary list, I have to make arbitrary standards, and that's one of the standards that I put on it. All right, next up on my list, maybe one that might be a bit controversial, might be my first controversial choice on this list, and that is the original series theme song.
Space, the final frontier.
Obviously, this song is so iconic. It draws up so many memories for so many people when they instantly hear this original series song. And all of that is true. But one of the reasons that I put it slightly lower on my list is, one, the singing. They're like, oh! Well, it's kind of like come into our hearts as like something like, oh yeah, I enjoy that singing now. Looking back on it, it's such a weird choice for the show. Again, I kind of love just because it is a weird choice and again fits into my nostalgia for the show, but on its own it's just a really strange idea. And also the other reason that I don't like the song, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the song itself but more like the motivations behind it, is that Alexander Courage wrote this song and should have gotten all the rights to it, but Gene Roddenberry at the time wanted to make sure he got some of the rights to the song, so he wrote some god-awful lyrics for the Star Trek theme song. So if you ever buy like the sheet music for the Star Trek theme song, you'll see that it has like lyrics to it that are just awful. And the only reason those are there is because Gene Roddenberry put them there so that he could have some sense of ownership over the song and then earn rights to it, which I think is a kind of crappy thing for him to have done. And again, arbitrary standards placing on this list. It's my list. I get to make the choices of why I put things lower or higher, and that one, that sort of story behind it kind of pushes it down for me. But again, it's an iconic song. It's one that's been used like in the Discovery theme and elsewhere to great effect, and I think it's really fun and beautiful and a great fanfare, but just ranks lower on my list just because of the singing and because of that kind of unfortunate, darker history behind the song. All right, next one on the list is the animated series theme song. Which I actually have a really strong affinity for. I think that this song is a little bit stronger than the original series because it doesn't have that awful singing, and yet it still clearly evokes the original feel and fanfare of the original series. Yes, it's a little less nostalgia-y because a lot less people have nostalgia for the animated series than the original series, but I think that this version of the theme song perfectly captures the same exact feeling of the original series theme without having that weird singing or the sort of darker Gene Roddenberry story behind it. And so for that reason, I think it ranks a little bit higher than the original series, just because it's basically doing the same thing. It basically has a very similar sound and feel and brings up the sort of same emotions, but it just doesn't have some of the like weirder choices or darker history to it. Alright, next up, and this is another controversial choice, I think that it's kind of in the middle of the list, is the Star Trek The Next Generation theme song.
To seek out new life and new civilizations. To boldly go where no one has gone before.
This one I know is going to be a bit controversial, and some people may say for them that it's their favorite theme song, but for me, I don't know why, but while this song is certainly fun, and I think it definitely captures exactly what Star Trek should be doing, for some reason I never really connected to it. I think part of it is because it's from another movie, it's from Star Trek The Motion Picture, and not necessarily The Next Generation. So it never really felt like Next Generation's own theme to me. Like, yes, we connect it to The Next Generation now, but thinking back on it, it feels a bit weird that they didn't have their own theme to it. Now, a few friends of mine have actually made a very good point that Star Trek The Next Generation, especially in early seasons, was a show that didn't really feel like it wanted to connect to Star Trek, the original series, all that much, outside of like the McCoy cameo in the first episode. The writers weren't even allowed to like mention other characters until we finally got Spock in the episode's Unification. And Sarek as well. Like, the writers really had to fight to get those characters in there and make those references. Otherwise, they just didn't want to reference it at all. So the fact that The Next Generation used a theme from the movies was a nice carryover, and at least made it feel like there was some connection between those two eras of the show, which is nice. But for me, I don't know. This one just never really clicked for me as something really intriguing to me. I will say the thing that does connect to me about this theme song is I love Patrick Stewart's monologue. For some reason, I connect more with Patrick Stewart's like, "Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the USS Enterprise." His monologue is great, but I'm really only judging the song. So when I hear Patrick Stewart over the song, that's where my nostalgia kicks in. It's like clearly creepy. It has this like kind of darker tone to it until we finally get to that fanfare. But I think that only kicks in for me with Patrick Stewart's monologue. So if I include Patrick Stewart's monologue, this would rank higher on my list, but as a song itself, it probably ranks a little bit lower. Alright, next up is the Star Trek Picard theme song, again by Jeff Russo, who did the Discovery theme song. This one might be a little bit recency bias, why it's so high, but I particularly loved this theme song. I thought Jeff Russo did a wonderful job kind of having a haunting theme that slowly, again, builds into a really beautiful Star Trek fanfare. And it kind of evokes a similar feel to the Discovery one, where it kind of brings us from a sort of haunting, sad feel into a more Star Trek-y adventure feel, and kind of guides us there, and I think that that's what Star Trek Picard the show is going to be. But the reason I rank this one higher than Discovery is because this one feels so rooted in the character of Picard. While the Discovery theme is just sort of like an overview of the series, the Picard one feels very personal, and I think part of that is because of the use of the piccolo flute, which is meant to evoke the flute from the inner light that Picard had. And it's such a brilliant use of weaving in Picard's character, something unique to him, into the theme, especially for a show that's so focused on one character. So I think Jeff Russo really knocked it out of the park and evolved his ideas that he had from the Discovery theme while also tying it into the ideas and themes of this particular show in particular. To use particular twice. It's a P word, Picard. We'll go for that. The alliteration was meant to evoke Picard. But yeah, I rank this one a little bit higher than the Discovery one, even though they're kind of chasing the same concept and idea. All right, the next one on my list, and this is getting into the ones that I consider to be phenomenal, like ones that really, really connect with me. And the first one on this is Deep Space Nine Seasons 1, 2, and 3 theme song. I think that this theme song really, really perfectly captured the idea of Deep Space Nine. It starts off, again, very similarly to Discovery and Picard, in that it has like a sort of a slow build in it, but this version of the theme starts with a single trumpet, a solo sound out in the void of space. And as we sort of get into the song more, then more and more instruments come in, more voices, and that so clearly evokes the whole concept of Deep Space Nine, that it's, this one solo space station out there in the middle of space that's not going off in adventures, it's just this one small space. But then this space slowly fills with diversity and people coming into the space station, and we getting this whole clash of cultures. And I think you really sense that in the building of the theme. And it's very haunting, the like fanfare, dun 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 dun. It's such a beautiful fanfare for the show that I every time I hear this version of the theme song, I get chills. And I think what I love most about this version, as opposed to the later version, which is higher on the list obviously, is that solo trumpet at the beginning. I think that just having one instrument was such a beautiful, beautiful choice for the opening of this series. Alright, next up on the list is the Star Trek Voyager theme song. I really, really love this theme song. I think this one evokes a lot of the same things as the Next Generation theme, but for some reason, the Voyager one just felt like a much more haunting, beautiful score. It is exactly what I want out of a very big fanfare Star Trek theme. It's like beautiful and epic, but like somewhat mysterious and evocative of adventure, but like the unknown, but still feels fully fun and intriguing the entire way through. That is so Star Trek. And I will say that one of the things that doesn't make it hit the top spot for me, because it could have been, is because I think it's a little less tied into the themes of the show, of Star Trek Voyager, in the way that like Discovery or Picard or Deep Space Nine sort of musically evokes the themes of the show. It's just a really, really beautiful fanfare for Voyager. But there's nothing I can particularly say like, oh, that's evocative of the theme of the series. But I just think the song in and of itself is such a wonderful, fantastic fanfare for Voyager and for Star Trek in general. Alright, second from the top, and that is the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Seasons 4 through 7 theme song. Now, everything that I said about the previous Deep Space Nine theme song stands. But what I really love about this one is I think the musicality of it, the instruments they bring in, they kind of have a bigger orchestra going on here. It really kind of evokes that fanfare-y sense of Deep Space Nine, but it still has that like creepy, evocative opening. Now the opening does have a bit more instruments going on than the single solo trumpet, but it still has that mysterious, eerie, forlorn, sort of isolated quality to it that really evokes Deep Space Nine for me. And then the other thing that I really, really loved about this is that we do get that solo trumpet still in the actual fanfare, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But one of the slight differences between this version and the earlier version is that the trumpet fanfare is, if you listen, slightly off from the beat of the actual music going on behind it. It feels like it's a little bit faster tempo than the rest of the song. So that trumpet is out of pace with the fanfare going on beneath. And that is so much what Deep Space Nine is about. It was a show that was very much Star Trek, but just a little bit different, a little bit out there, a little bit quirky, a little bit stranger than Next Generation and Voyager. And I think with this theme song, they really owned that identity, that they were at the time, they were sort of seen as the like weird stepbrother of the Star Trek franchise between Next Generation and Voyager. And Deep Space Nine has come to earn its place as probably, at least in my opinion, one of the best Star Trek series ever. But the fact that they took the music and said like, you know, we are that trumpet. We are the one that, you know, we are part of Star Trek. We're part of making this music, but we're just a little off. It's a little offbeat. And I think that just is a really kind of wonderful, wonderful way to introduce us to Deep Space Nine. And so for my final choice as my personal, and I will say this is my personal favorite Star Trek theme, not what I think is the best theme, but my personal favorite is the Star Trek Enterprise Seasons 1 and 2 theme song.
It's been a long road getting from there to here. It's been a long time, but my time is finally here, and I can see my dream.
Oh boy, this is gonna be the one that's gonna get me all the comments and the hate, but let me explain. Please stick with me before you go and rant in the comments about how I know nothing about theme songs. You know, it's strange because I put the Enterprise Seasons 3 and 4 theme song at the bottom of the list and then put Seasons 1 and 2 at the top. And the reasons for that is, obviously this version's better. Just, you know, from a purely, you know, distance point of view, it's slower paced, it's got a little bit more mystery and evocativeness to it and sort of a fun adventure feel to it than the original Enterprise theme. It's still a weird choice for a Star Trek show. It's clearly one that was made as like, yeah, we're trying to be the hip early 2000s show and get down with the youth. We know what pop music is, right? Listen to this. It's clearly that sort of theme, but the reason that I rank this one so high are not necessarily because of its artistic merit, but because of the personal stories that I have with this song. And I connect to it very personally because there's a lot of personal connections. The one very obvious one that's just fun is I think I have more fun with this song with other Star Trek people in the community than I think I've had with any other Star Trek theme. Like when I do an RPG with Ket Walski and a few other Star Trek YouTubers over on Lore Reloaded channel on Monday, cross promotion. But what I love doing in that is I love like referencing like, well, my character will just say like, oh yeah, it's been a long road getting from there to here, and you just instantly see all the other like Trekkie people will either be like, oh god, why are you bringing that up, or other people be like, yeah, it's been a long road getting from there to here, it's been a long, like, it's just fun, like it brings up so many emotions, but in like a fun kind of sarcastic way for everybody, that, you know, we can either be like, yeah, we're gonna love it ironically, or we're gonna, you know, be like, oh god, that song again. It's you know, at the time I'm sure it would have been frustrating, but to hear that song every time you watch Enterprise, but nowadays it's just kind of fun to know that that's a part of Star Trek history. It's just a weird, quirky part that we can kind of all joke about and have fun with, and I just love the memories that that brings up. But then also, the other thing with this theme is a very personal story for me, is when I was first discovering Star Trek. I found Star Trek through my father. I've already told the story before that the first person to introduce me to Star Trek was my dad when he put in the Star Trek Nemesis audiobook. And I fell in love with the audiobook and then found the show. And then I started finding Star Trek The Next Generation. My dad bought me the DVDs of Star Trek The Next Generation. And at the time, neither of us actually knew that Enterprise was on, that was show, because at the time it was just called Enterprise and not Star Trek Enterprise. And so, you know, I was going through the history. I was about like, I think like 8 or 9, maybe 10. I forget the exact year, but I was younger. And, you know, going through Star Trek and kind of discovering my taste and my love for the show. And then one day I come up from the basement. We had a basement rec room. And I just remember my dad had found Enterprise. And he called me and was like, you know, come here. Watch this. And he showed me the Enterprise theme song. And he was very enamored with the visuals of Enterprise. Of, you know, the fact that it was showing the history of space travel through time. You know, we got to see, you know, the Enterprise shuttle, and then we got to see Zephram Cochrane's thing, and then we got to see the actual NX-01 ship. He thought that that was such a cool thing, and I just remember being so enamored with my dad's love of this theme song, of this show, of this thing, and then from there, I got to start watching Star Trek Enterprise. It was the first Star Trek show that I got to sit down and be prepared for week to week, and I just got so excited, and I luckily came on Enterprise at the same time that Season 3 was starting, which is when Enterprise started, in my opinion, getting really, really good into some really great Trek stories. You may differ on that, but I really like Seasons 3 and 4 of Enterprise. So I caught it at just the right time to really, really love this theme song. And so, I don't know, I just, that personal connection with my dad to that moment, and then how much it evokes my love of Enterprise and love of Star Trek in general, it just really makes this song, and the fact that it's just so much fun to just sing and have fun within the Trek community, just really makes the Enterprise theme song my #1 pick for the best Star Trek theme song. But again, this is my personal list. It does not have to be yours. I'm sure many of you would rate that song way lower. So I would love to hear what your rankings are of the Star Trek theme songs. Did you agree with my list? Did you disagree? Please let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to catch more Star Trek videos like this, discussions of how science fiction makes us more human, makes us better, as well as more reviews of Star Trek Picard as it comes out, reviews of Doctor Who, reviews of other things, more Star Trek discussions. All that happens on this channel, and it's not just Star Trek, it's all science fiction shows in general, so make sure to hit that subscribe, and if you want to help make these videos even better, please consider giving to my Patreon page or to my PayPal account. It really helps me. I'm doing a move. I'm moving in literally the week that you see this video, I'm moving, and also I have a surgery come up, so any financial help that you may want to give really, really does mean a lot to me. But regardless of if you subscribe or if you give to my Patreon or my PayPal, I am just glad that you came and stopped by and that we had some fun together. And I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.
And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons, Stephen Schuhart, Michael McGee, Boyd Earl, Law Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Munir Amlani, BBD, and Mari Nekar.